We just live right now, man. It's going down, excited for the season. You know, we coming off a playoff win. I mean, you know, we had a couple wins.
Hello, and welcome to Diaries, a Milwaukee Bucks podcast presented by us, the staff of Brewhoop. My name is Riley Feldman, one of your usual co-hosts here for episode 193 of the podcast. So week since we last spoke. It's a lot to talk about, kind of not a lot to talk about. It'll be interesting where this discussion goes. Glad to be joined to talk about the 1 and 2 week. First, we're going to bring in first time, long time. And by first time, long time, I mean I haven't talked to him in like 2 weeks, I guess. Spent a lot of time becoming very familiar with both the best and potentially the worst in children's cinema. It's Kyle Carr. Kyle, how are you doing tonight?
I am good. It has been a couple of weeks. I was going to say, we have not recorded like a month, but...
Yeah, it's been a while since you and I were on together.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm good. Got through Christmas and Sterling's birthday. It was exhausting, but also a good time. And then I tried doing wallpaper removal today, and that was a choice that I'm glad I did it. I hate it, though. I hate it.
It's valuable background information for the listeners based on your mood today and the spice level of your takes. Just know Kyle's been really hammering at some wallpaper like all day, and then he decided off of that, now he's going to be hopping on talk about Bucks.
Someone's going to get the frustration, and it's going to be the Milwaukee Bucks.
That's it. They wouldn't have it any other way. We're also happy to be joined by the Aussie from Adelaide, or environs thereupon, Jack Traherne. Jack, how are you doing?
Yeah, Riley, better today. Yesterday I was pretty hot. I had to step away from basketball completely. When the Bucks lose, I just don't want to know who won, who lost. Chucked on some Squid Games, ate some ice cream, and got over it. So doing okay now. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you've had time to be able to cool down.
Yeah, I'm cool now.
That's why we plug right here. Brewhoop's playback. Obviously, any game that the Bucks play, you can join us over on playback.tv/Brewhoop to watch the games with the staff as we go through. You essentially just do a side-by-side simulcast. There's always been the idea of trying to work it so that we get the playback right into an immediate post-game, like podcast or YouTube clip. I'm not sure a lot of the losses it would be good to do that, because I just can't imagine the mood would be great. It may make for great content, but I'm always a little nervous about that. But I'm glad you've had time to cool down. Let's talk about those 3 games real quick before we turn it over to what we learned this week. Bucks started it on a high note without Dame or Giannis on the road against the Chicago Bulls with a 112-91 victory. Quite dominant. The final score is more complimentary to the Bulls than it actually would have. They were getting stomped on pretty good until, it was essentially victory cigar lineup time in the fourth. Then the Bucks hit the road, play the Brooklyn Nets, lose in, let's call it somewhat frustrating fashion, 105-111. Again, Dame and Giannis are out, so just Chris and the boys. And then finally, they head back to Chicago. Weird week, 2 Chicago road games to wrap up the season series against them. Yet another loss, 111-116, with the game on the line. This one is the return of Damian Lillard from illness. I think he missed 4 games, I'm pretty sure. Apparently he's pretty nasty illness, still not feeling great, but he legged it out for a 35-minute performance. So losses, good to have Dame back. A lot of stuff to get into. Let's go to you first, Kyle, since you've been off for a couple weeks. What did you learn about the Milwaukee Bucks this week?
I feel like we saw with Milwaukee's depth, the volatility of these bench players really makes a difference. Because if you look at how Milwaukee played in Chicago earlier, it was overall like there were contributions from the normal bench players. Like Gary Trent Jr. was, 5 of 10 from the field, 4 of 6 from 3. AJ Green didn't have the best shooting night, but he was still hitting shots, made all his free throws. Defensively, pretty good. DeLon Wright probably had his best game as a Buck, which I'm not even exaggerating on. But, we saw that Ryan Rollins coming into the starting lineup. So we saw more often that bench kind of contributing in that Bulls win. And then when you look at the Nets game, it was kind of it was like a high and a low for some players, like DeLon Wright, shooting the ball, terrible. But he was setting up, he was making good passes, So his passing was at least helping out Milwaukee's offense, particularly in the second quarter. Taurean Prince hit a couple threes that now he's kind of been relegated to the bench with Chris coming back. His three-point shooting has been hit or miss. AJ Green's is kind of the same way. So I feel like with these guys, and then Bobby Portis, we'll talk more about him, but it was like we saw good Bobby Portis and we saw not great Bobby Portis in these games. So I think it's just with this bench, obviously not having Giannis and Dame affected Milwaukee, but at the same time, we had seen they were able to beat the Bulls pretty confidently with no problems. They still went and beat the Wizards not too long before then. So, and that was when Bobby Portis dropped a near triple-double. So we know that this bench can contribute and step up in the ways that they can. But we also saw where those flaws really get exposed, particularly when it comes to scoring in the second half. Because we'll talk about more of the Nets game. That is a game the Bucks should have won. There is no excuse for that. They should have won that game. The Bulls game, it never felt like Milwaukee was ever going to kind of take the game and run away with it. And I think that's kind of the issue is when you start having these bench guys having to step up more and more and more, you kind of see those flaws and you kind of see the very high highs and the very low lows for most of these players. Like Ryan Rollins can contribute, and I think when he's not expected to step up, he can do really well. Again, last night against the Bulls was an example. He didn't have to start. It was not really on him to kind of be that primary ball handler. He excelled, 7 rebounds, 3 of 6 from the field. Generally, more smart decisions were made. But then we see in the game against the Nets, not as influential, not as much of them like able to contribute, did commit the foul at the end for the Cam Johnson and one, which at that point didn't even matter. But it kind of did feel as though like someone like him, we saw the highs and lows. Taurean Prince, didn't really shoot the best this past week. Same with AJ Green. Like they've kind of gone through a slump of sorts. Again, like I said, with Bobby Portis, 5 of 17, really, really bad yesterday. But then he almost drops a triple-double. So I think it's just like with these bench guys, we're getting a lot of that volatility. And when you have games where Giannis and Dame are out, you need those guys to contribute. Even if you lose one of them, especially Giannis, you need Bobby Portis to have better shooting days. You need Taurean Prince to be able to hit his threes and AJ Green to hit his threes so he can open up the floor a little bit more and prevents it from being clogged. Brook Lopez had a great game against Brooklyn in the first half. Invisible in the second half, didn't do that well against the Bulls. And another frustrating kind of thing. He's not a bench guy, but he's kind of more of those role players where the very low really hurt Milwaukee and he wasn't able to be as effective in the paint as Chicago was able to kind of get points in the paint at will.
The other thing I would note, so I agree with all of that. Part of the problem is the fact that we're running guys way more minutes. I mean, quite obviously, Damian Lillard's return just verifies once again that DeLon Wright is effectively out of the lineup. So Dame is back. Rollins gets the lead point guard off the bench role, and DeLon Wright demoted yet again. And you know what? His performance, and especially in the fourth quarter, start of the fourth quarter of the Nets game, feels appropriate that he got demoted. The thing that's obvious when you watch it without the stars is that the coaching staff or the players or whomever really struggle to run a coherent system that tries to get good looks for guys that aren't the main stars, right? So you watch that Bulls game and so many of the actions for Dame are predicated upon Brook Lopez pick and pops or occasionally pick and rolls, but it's almost always some sort of action to get him free, which is totally fine. But it's based off of him doing that and then see what he creates from there. He feeds out to Brook, who might pass it along to whomever, whatever the situation is. Instead, once we start getting to the Gary Trent Jr.'s of the world, the Taurean Princes of the world, DeLon Wright's afraid to shoot the ball, but if he shoots the ball, well, him as well. These guys, the best idea they have is just to drive and see what happens when they get there. It's like, okay, so there's clearly not really a plan, or they haven't really worked with these guys, which makes sense because they're going to be tertiary players, role players when the full stars are back. But when they're not there, it's freestyle ball out there, or at least it feels like that. And I'm sorry, but I mean, Jack and I, we were on the playback for the Nets game. Gary Trent Jr. is not, he's not creating. He can occasionally, but he's not consistent enough creator, and he's a little selfish when he starts driving. Like that's kind of typical for a shooting guard. Taurean Prince all of a sudden driving like 5 or 6 times a game. Like, what the hell is that about? It sometimes works, but it's also slightly confusing that Torian Prince is driving. And so that to me just belies the fact that the coaching or the structure or whatever it happens to be is too limited for the guys down the pecking order. And that'll bleed a little bit into what I learned. But I think that's something you could even say, even when all three stars are out there. Like, of course, they can generate looks off of those guys. But it's pretty rare that we like really work hard with a play with somebody other than those three as like a primary option that's not Bobby posting up. So I agree with all of that, Kyle, and I think it also belies the fact that these guys are not being probably put in the right positions or coached in the right ways to kind of help maximize the fact that they have lesser talent than the stars.
Yeah. I thought, just execution wise, like the way the shots that they're trying to get to with the guys out is just like, it's like you said, Riley. It's just like they're just not executing that well. Like within sort of each possession, with whoever's on the court, like we have to have a plan about what we're trying to get to in terms of like, even if there is just Bobby Portis on the court, like what are we going to do to get him a good shot? Can we get Brook on a mismatch or something like that? And yeah, I really agree with what Kyle said. Like there's just not much of a plan sort of going on with getting those other guys involved, really.
The thing about it's weird too because Bobby's the only one on the floor. So we noted in the end of the third, early fourth of that Bulls loss, the third game of the week, where Chris and Dame are both on the bench. So Bobby's out there. What does that mean? It means Bobby's going to take every single shot because that's just the way things are designed. And yet they do a bad job. Like you said, Jack, not every time. Like it's very clear what they should be doing. Like I appreciate Ryan Rollins. He can kind of dribble a little bit on the perimeter. Maybe you see if there's another look. But for the most part, we all know what we're down here to do. We're going to ride the tough shot express and see if it works. But even then, on top of that, it's not very efficient basketball. I think I saw on somewhere on Reddit, I think it was the Bucks subreddit, somebody looked up the numbers and Bobby is posting up more as a Buck than he ever has. Like I think it's a quarter of his possessions or post ups, which feels actually low, all things considered. And his efficiency is dropping precipitously. And we had that brief spurt where it was like, oh, maybe Bobby's turning it around because he just became a catch and shoot three guy again, which is what worked so well for him early on. And yet we get down to this and it's like, okay, well, we're going to have to do the inefficient thing because nobody else here is all that good at whatever they're trying to do. And they struggle to put it together. And part of that too is the other team knows who are they going to? They're going to Bobby Portis. That could also be said for the final 5 minutes, which I'll get into in my stuff in a minute. But like the Bulls knew how to shut off Dame and Chris, quite obviously. Like that was very straightforward for them. And the Bucks didn't have another answer because if it's not those guys creating something, we don't have anything in the bag right now when the game is on the line.
Yeah, I think there's also kind of the aspect of I don't want to like single out Bobby because it's not just a him problem. Like Brook Lopez taking as many threes as he did yesterday is also very infuriating. I don't like, yes, I understand he was hot against the Nets, but at the same time, you gotta, and I know some of those were kind of late in the game three. So I would say, let's say 10 threes were Brook chose to do that. That's not an effective plan though. Like that shouldn't, like we should not, Brook Lopez should not take the most threes out of any Buck in a game. Like that should not happen. And that kind of will go into the other points that you guys will lay out. But it doesn't help Bobby to do all the posting up while Brook is out there chucking up threes. Like it should be the opposite. Like we should have Bobby out there doing catch and shoot threes and Brook doing more work in the post. And then you can start pulling them back. Like after, it's kind of like after a couple shots, if you're not feeling it, stop doing it.
Low key, the biggest bummer to the two losses was the fact that we actually got relatively good Brook games. Like he scored 20 plus in both. It wasn't super efficient against the Bulls, but between that and the fact that he's going up for rebounds himself without Giannis out there is like good. I feel like I would have to go look at the stats, but I feel like the rebounding has become slightly less of a problem. The offensive rebounding, or I should say opponent offensive rebounding. So that's a bummer is like, okay, Giannis is still out in the Nets game. Dame is still out. Brook has a good game and they can't put it together. Like that's always kind of a bummer. So yeah, I would. I was going to see if we want to do the 8-man exercise, but maybe it's a little too early to see if Kyle with a slight shake of the head and
I don't think I can come up with one right now.
That's all right. Yeah, that's part of the problem too. Is like we need to get the big three together so that we can establish what the rotation is. We had a new idea of what it looked like by the time of the NBA Cup final, and now Dame and Giannis have been out, so it's like okay, we still don't really have a clue what it is. I think I'll just go real quick on my points. So I was very curious. The thing that what the hell is it called? FanDuel Sports Network Wisconsin broadcast is that that crew. They whatever it is. It's like the Milwaukee pro basketball podcast presented by the staff of Brewhoop or whatever ours is called. So they posted the clutch time stats in the Nets game and the Bulls game because they qualified for it. For those at home who don't know what clutch time is, it's whenever a game is within 5 points with 5 minutes or less in the fourth quarter or overtime. Now, I think the way that it works is, let's say it's a 5-point lead and then a team pushes out to 7, then it no longer starts counting as clutch time. So it's a little convoluted. I don't know exactly how the NBA does it, but in having essentially fumbled the game the past 2 games in clutch time, I went through and I highly encourage you to go read tomorrow's Monday Morning Media Roundup because there's a lot of different stats in there. But I looked and I was like, well, what's the team's overall like ratings and what are the player ratings? So last season, the Bucks had a plus 15.1 net rating in clutch time throughout the season. That would be 5th best in the league. They had the 7th best offense and 5th best defense, 119.8 on offense, which is astounding, and then 104.6 on defense, which is pretty good. This season, and smaller sample size, of course, but I think the Bucks are up to, I want to say it's 15 games at this point. They are minus 6.8 net, which puts them at 21st. Their offensive rating is 100 flat, which is close to being flatline for a team that has Giannis, Dame, and Chris. Of course, they haven't played together all that much. And a 106.8 defensive rating, which is 10th. So the defense has been pretty good. Like, we go into the season, you say, hey, you got to be top 10 in offensive and defensive rating to be considered like a contender. In clutch time, the defense has stabilized. It's better now. The offense is dreadful. And then of the 3 main guys so far, Dame has a minus 1.4 net rating in clutch time. He's scoring 2.8 points on 2 attempts. Giannis has a plus 15.1 net rating in clutch time, averaging 3.6 points on 2.2 attempts. His efficiency is obviously a lot higher. And Chris, in very limited, I think it's just 6 games so far for him, minus 10.7 net rating. So what is this all telling me when I'm looking at this? The team doesn't really know what they're going to do late. And they were able to work it out, obviously, based off of the ratings last season. But last season, Dame was quite obviously based off of the points scored. He was number 1 option. Giannis was number 2. Chris was a distant third when it came to creating and scoring, which I think would match the eye test and match what we would expect, which is Chris is maybe the 3-point guy off an ATO or something like that. But otherwise, he's just kind of like the decoy. He might set somebody else up. I wonder with Dame if teams are really nowadays able to dial in and blitz him and shut him off from whatever his first action is. And that came up against the Bulls in particular. There were a lot of possessions where, he drives on the wing, he gets the pick and pop, Giddey reads the pass back like really well, blocks it, and then Dame turns it over or whatever. Or even if Dame gets past that, now he's doubled on the wing and he's got to try and find somebody else. And as we just discussed, nobody else is really all that capable of making something happen. And then same thing with Chris. He dribbles into a double team, gets stripped. I think it was just a fast break the other direction that helped seal the deal. And he tried to force essentially a back down on Giddey to sort of prove a point, but also because that's like his ideal shot. And that's just not amazing basketball per se. So my clutch time looking through here, team's got a long way to go in terms of offense. I mean, have you guys noticed that as well, that there's outside of just these 2 games? I mean, it's a larger sample than that. Have you noticed the struggles at ends of games?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry, you go, Kyle.
I was going to say, kind of, just because I'm thinking of the Nets game, and a lot of what was the struggle at the Nets game was it was a lot of Chris Middleton facilitating the offense. And I think we got to get to the point where Chris needs to stop doing that because he's not able to get past his player when he has like on the dribble. He's always had more looser handles, and it kind of feels like if you put enough pressure on him, he will either turn the ball over or make a sloppy pass that throws the offense out of rhythm. So I think there is part of that aspect. And I mean, someone had to run that offense in that Brooklyn game with no Dame, with no Giannis, to kind of just go and be like, all right, this is my time. But it did feel like there was a stretch where it felt like Milwaukee was able to like do what they needed to do to close out games. And I think it was like in the midst of their win streak, where I was like against the Rockets, against the Bulls, Pacers, like it felt like they were putting it together. They were finally able to kind of get that idea of this is how it's going to work in a clutch. We're going to execute. We're going to make the plays that are needed. But I think a lot of that was because you had Giannis and Dame. While lately you haven't had one or the other. You've kind of had, it's kind of been like you had one or you had the other. Other than the Hawks game in the NBA Cup, it did feel as though we found a way to kind of regress almost to what we were saying at the beginning of the season. So I don't know how much of that is just fine margins turning things around. I don't know how much of it is maybe teams are just more dialed in, but it does feel as though Milwaukee's starting to regress in that clutch aspect as opposed to during that win streak where they're able to put it all together. Also, part of what made it so fun with Adrian Griffin's time with the Bucks is they were really, really good in the clutch. And that was like part of the reason why their record was so well is because they were one of the best clutch teams in the league for some reason. Like their defense would be significantly, I think I wrote it last year in a Wednesday weekly wrap up, like their defense would completely 180 to where they were in clutch time. Their offense was still as efficient as ever. And I think there was going to be some regressing to me because what they were doing last year was a little bit unheard of. So maybe it is part of that as well.
Jack, your thoughts on clutch time?
Yeah, Kyle, I don't really have much more to say. It's sort of what Kyle said. A bit of what you were talking about too, Riley, with Middleton. I think Middleton, you want to get him in those spots where he's already kind of in an area of comfort for him. Maybe that's, I think, what the idea. Number one, he was being guarded by Josh Giddey, and I think he felt like that was a matchup to go at. And there was some media from Chicago who were pointing out that Giddey did quite a good job in the end of that game guarding Middleton. But yeah, sort of I touched on it a little bit in what I said before, but just like the number one thing that I worry about with this team is like throughout a game, you got Giannis, Dame, etc. You're gonna score, but like, okay, we need a bucket here. What are we going to? I have no clue if the team knows what they're trying to get to, and a lot of that was illustrated by like. This isn't in clutch time, but I recall like the Chicago game. There was me and Morgan and I were talking about on playback, but there was Taurean Prince. It was like a fast break sort of thing. Ajax throws this like loopy pass over to Taurean Prince on the wing, and he's like fading out of bounds off a pass he caught it like up here. He shoots it, throws away a possession. And then there was like 3 straight drives. Now, Torian can come off if it's like a zoom action where like he's getting like a screen into a handoff and he can just go straight line. He's okay off them, but I don't want to call it like selfish sort of shots, but he tried to like cook 3 times in a row off the dribble. And I'm like, Torian, that is not you. Like, you got to give that to someone else. Like, you're doing too much. Like that. It's like that Patrick Ewing meme that we were talking about on one of those playbacks, right? It's do you practice this shot?
That's your
Torian,
shot?
You do not.
When do you work on that shot?
Yeah. Torian, you do not do this. All right, you're doing too much right now. Give the ball up. And there was just a few I felt like they got back in the game late in that third quarter after that horrible start to the second half, and the Bulls missed like 4 shots in a row, and all that we could come up with for all those shots was like Taurean Prince driving, and it's like and yeah, it's just like we could have extended that lead a lot more. The Bulls were getting good looks. They were actually executing on their end, but they just were missing shots, and we weren't giving ourselves a good enough opportunity to extend that lead. And maybe if we had done that, it would have been a different story later in that game, and we would have had it tied up. But yeah, just valuing possessions. Like what shot. I understand that, like, if Torian's probably not doing that if Giannis is playing, but like I feel like when guys are out, it's like, okay, well, we can get to something better than that. I'm positive that this is not the best option we can get to.
The that or the Nets game on the line, AJ Green just launches that pull-up jumper and transition. It was like, well, I think the Bucks still had a lead at that point. It's like, you probably could have let the clock run a little bit. Yeah. I'm not gonna say that was the key moment, but that's just indicative of like, all right, we got to be a little smarter in how we're gonna handle this possession to possession. So here's the good news. So far this season, if I exclude guys who haven't played in more than 5 clutch games, again, this is all stupid terminology, but this is NBA.com stats we're talking. Giannis is the 11th best scorer, Dame is 28th, and Chris is 29th on the season. Last year, Dame was 6th in the league, and Giannis was 21st. So individually, they're all still talented scorers. I don't think that we need to look at it and say, oh my God, they don't have a clue. I think we're switching, though, from what we did last season, which was let Dame do the primary initiation, let Giannis set a screen and see where it goes from there. I think it's going to go the other way now. Maybe Dame brings it up the court, but Giannis is going to be the first option because he's the most efficient. He's the most effective so far. And unfortunately for Dame, and the weird situation with like Dame time where it's like, oh, you're bringing in one of the best clutch players in the NBA. It's like, well, it doesn't feel like he has the same sort of separation or even the same off the dribble 3-point shot ability. Like the number of air balls that he's taken from off the dribble threes this year feels high. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's kind of was his deal in Portland too, but I feel like we need to adjust to Giannis being the first option. All this talk about who's the closer. Giannis is the closer. Dame is number 2. Chris is out there. That's kind of what the approach is going to be. And we just need the reps. Like you just need the reps to see it work, have it come together, and that'll solve a lot of the different problems. So all of that was kind of what I was interested in with clutch time. Again, not a whole condemnation of the team, but interesting to note, and I think it matches the eye test. The other thing I wanted to note from what I learned this week, quick guards who have a clue are trouble. Kobe White, he was trouble for us on Friday, less so on I think it was Monday, but he was trouble for us then. A lot of Bulls players were trouble for us early in the season when the team was abjectly horrible. So, that's kind of a dime a dozen. And the reason why quick guards with a clue or bravery or whatever, I mean, Dennis Schroeder a couple weeks ago absolutely tore the Bucks apart, and he's not even that quick, but he's quick-ish, is that Damian Lillard, it remains a really bad defender, and I pulled up the numbers here because I just wanted to verify it, because the truth cannot be controversial on Dear Diaries and Milwaukee Bucks podcast. He officially has the worst on-court defensive rating of anybody on the team, which is tough to believe because usually you'll have like the two-way guys who get out there and it's such a shit show that their defensive rating will be like 305. Dame is at 115.5 overall on the floor, and his net rating is minus 1.6. So the defense gets about 4 rating points worse with him on the floor as a team overall, and the offense gets a little bit better. And then off the floor, the defense goes to 103.6. Folks, that's like a 12-point net rating swing. I mean, that is not, it's not. And also, ironically enough, the offense also gets better. The team overall is better on both ends of the floor. Oh, wait, never mind. Sorry. The offense does not get better. The offense gets a lot worse. The defense does get a lot better, though. So I feel like the team has improved defensively, and it's not just feelings because, like we've talked about, the defense overall has improved a lot since the 2-8 start. However, I'm still real nervous about Damian Lillard being a defender on the floor, and nothing in that Bulls game gave me any sort of hope or confidence. And right now the team needs to be grasping forward for how can we get 4 defenders and where can we hide Dame? And because Giannis has been missing or other guys have been missing, it's hard to do that. And it's really hard to do that in the clutch or at the end of games because Ajax is such a zero on offense. It's already hard enough to get these guys free when there's 5 competent offensive players. Ajax is not that. He's not a scoring threat. If I was the other team, I would completely ignore him. I would say whoever's guarding Ajax, actually, you're doubling literally anybody else on the floor. So the team has this problem where Dame is a horrible defender. I know, he gives it his all. Media doesn't give him credit for all the effort he puts in. I know, Dame. But the numbers are kind of what they are. And when you watch it, you're like, okay, guys are just kind of driving by him. It's not good. And when it's the Bobby and Brooke show, you're like, it's really not good because now it's Bobby in space trying to cover. And we've talked ad nauseum about how bad that is. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Dame for being the worst defender on the team. It's in terms of net rating. Again, I know he gives a lot of effort, and I know that he takes point of pride in his play on that end of the floor, but statistically, it's not looking really good. Anybody else concerned but Damian Lillard, the defender?
I mean, I don't know if I can be more concerned because I've already had the concerns.
Yeah.
But hearing that stat, I'm just like, ooh, that's not great. But I think you have to do it, though. You're going to have to put, because the problem is with the closing lineup, it's going to be Dame, Giannis, Chris, Brooke, and then probably either an AJ Green, Andre Jackson Jr., or Gary Trent Jr.
Yep.
And the problem is, if it's Andre Jackson Jr., he's not going to be as effective in a slow down, more or less half court offense, slow down, grind to a halt. That's not where he's going to thrive. He's going to be more while the ball's moving, while it's kind of more fast break, a lot of ball movement.
And let's be honest, also, he's barely effective in fast break. Numerous times this week, it's Ajax. He's got the 2-on-1, and he doesn't even really go for the contact. Again, very strange. All these lanky guys we get out of the draft that just really are allergic to contact driving to the hoop. It's very odd.
And you see him run, he gets the ball right at the top of the key, and he makes the right pass. He shows his basketball IQ. But either way, I think with one of those three, each of them are going to have their strengths and weaknesses. Ajax is the best defender, but offensively the most limited. AJ Green has the highest ceiling. Defensively, he's fine, but is that going to be enough to hide Dame? And then you have Gary Trent Jr., where I guess he's the best defender of the three, maybe, but also the most. I feel like on offense, it's well, are you going to need him on offense? So it kind of feels like you're not going to be able to hide Dame in that kind of closing lineup. So I've already had my concerns. I don't think anything Milwaukee does will change that. You just hope that either Dame could do just enough to get a deflection, or everyone else just has to be able to be ready. Because with Dame and Chris, you're pretty much throwing 2 negative defenders out there.
The only hope I really have with Ajax is they did some nice action with him in the Brooklyn game as a screener. And I thought that's intriguing. Now, long term, if he never learns to shoot, he has to turn into mini Draymond Green. He'll never survive if he can't do that. And the one, it's the classic thing. If no one's guarding him, he is a free screen. So put him in the action, have him screen for Dame, and have him making decisions. Now, it would be nice. There was a play in the Brooklyn game where he caught it in the middle of the court, and he basically had a meter of space just to floater it up, and he doesn't. I mean, that's actually, to be honest, that's his only really middle shot. He doesn't really have a mid-range, but still, he's not confident with it. And he kind of held it for a second and then did this bounce pass to Bobby, and Bobby shot this short corner shot. So yeah, it's with him, they have to teach him how to be Draymond Green. Otherwise it's just not going to work. I agree with everything else. AJ Green's kind of the nice middle ground between Trent and Jackson. You kind of, if Jackson's not working, you kind of just have to go with. I mean, they closed with Rollins last night on Levine, which I thought was interesting. But that Kyle basically had all my other thoughts as well.
I do like the Andre Jackson Jr. be more of a light Draymond Green. I do like that idea because I think it would best utilize his basketball IQ, his athleticism, while also because he can make a corner three if he has the space and the openness. And if he has it, he can do it. But maybe, being more of a Draymond, I really like that idea, actually.
You can tell he's the one role guy, like deep role guy, where it's like, oh, okay. The coaches have an idea what they want to do with him, because what else they have to have an idea for him. They have to structure every possession unless it's a fast break, in which case, kind of go with God. But we were noting it a couple of weeks ago, how prevalent his on-ball screens for Dame in particular, like boom, he'll like set a screen. Okay. It didn't lead to the look right away. He's right back there setting it again. Like he's just out there working that 2-man game if it's not Brook, which I think is great, and utilizing a guy with limited offensive talent right now in ways that maximizes and makes him like somebody. And he does have, times where he gets the ball in that at the elbow or in the midcourt. He's not going to attack, but he can make the quick read and find a guy on the 3-point line who's open, which is actually impressive. So it's not a lost cause for him, but feel like one of the tougher guys to fit in for that closing lineup. AJ Green has been on a cold streak shooting wise lately, but defensively, I think he has some chops. Gary Trent Jr. sort of, again, not super impressed. The one thing, who do you think is more hesitant to take a wide open three these days? Ajax or DeLon Wright?
DeLon Wright.
Man, probably DeLon. Yeah.
I should have.
That Brooklyn game was too much. That Brooklyn game was like, oh no.
I lost it after the second air ball. Like he airballed 2 threes, and I'm like he has lost his confidence completely, and it's like part of me is like sad to see. I'm just like, man, he does not believe in himself. It looks like right now, but like for an NBA player, like an NBA point guard, to airball 2 threes, wow.
As Kyle noted, though, you'll have a moment where it's like, why is DeLon driving? Like, why isn't he just taking 3? And then DeLon will have like the nicest setup you've ever seen for a guy on the opposite corner to get like the open 3. It's like, actually, okay, let DeLon cook. He knows what he's doing. He has an idea. Just for numbers' sake here, just so we get all the facts. Ajax is taking 1.8 threes a game, and he's making miraculously 35% of them. DeLon Wright is taking 1.9 threes a game, and he's making 26.2% of them. So we're going to need to work on that. But anyways, a lot of interesting questions, a lot of interesting things. I think losing the Stars obviously hurts in terms of wins and losses, but it really exposes what are these other guys' like skill sets. What's the high-low here? Because I feel like even with their struggles, Ajax and AJ Green, it's like, okay, I still see that you guys have things you can bring to bear. Brook has good games. Like, okay, Brook still has plenty to bring to bear. Bobby saves the season on Monday. Then he loses it the next 2 games. But, he still has something to bear. So it's effective for understanding kind of where everybody's at once we fit everyone back into a proper rotation. Final question before we move on. Bobby Portis trade machine proposals. Are they back on? Yes or no?
Yes.
They never stopped.
That.
Even when he had a triple-double to save the season against
it was the Wizards.
Yeah, okay.
The bar is in hell. That's like saying, hey, Jay Crowder actually was on the NBA court. Like,
yeah. I mean, I say it all the time. Bobby is a supremely talented player. There are not a lot of guys at that height that can do what he can do, like at that size and that weight that have his touch. He's a talented player, but I've always maintained that, like, when we play the Celtics and these teams that like can guard him with Jason Tatum if they want to, like, and we're going to like it just doesn't work. Like the offensive that we should be going to on the court does not really include him in those most important situations. And as soon as we got Dame, it's like, okay, he's not really a fit on this team. So if the trade values was high, or maybe it's not as high anymore, but I maintain that we should trade him. Yeah.
I was reading an article earlier today about the center trade market, and I want to say it was Zach Cram at the Ringer, and he was like, there are 17 teams in the league that don't need another center, and Milwaukee's one of them. I was like, quite clearly you're not watching a lot of Milwaukee Bucks basketball, because I'll tell you what, we certainly could use another big center. Okay, if it's specifically a center, maybe not, but we could certainly use a big with a more refined skill set than. Yeah,
there needs to be another center. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Giannis is here, Kyle. He's going to become center one day. Do you think that'll ever happen? I don't think Giannis is ever going to become center. I've moved on from that idea. I think at this
Maybe
point
in
in my life.
Giannis 3.0.
We haven't even gotten to 2.0. We're thinking 3.0. Yeah, down the road.
The Giannis at center thing is so interesting because the best version of this team is he is the backup center. Like I've thought about that a lot. Like it is, and it just like, I mean, is it just at this point that he doesn't want to do it? I mean, I know he doesn't like banging with the big bodies down there for whatever reason, but like, how many people are really going to post up Giannis? I don't know, man. Like, I
thought the same thing.
Yeah.
I've always wondered. I'm like, it's not really. I mean, one, how many post up bigs are there? Like,
Yeah, not a whole lot.
Or realistically, how many dudes are doing post ups that's not literally Giannis's teammate, who is like one of the most post up heavy guys in the world? I think maybe it's more so about like having to fight for the rebounds and stuff rather than him having to defend other bigs. But that's another thing that I'm hopeful when the Bucks ever get healthy, we'll see that variations upon that, because we kind of hinted upon it. We kind of stumbled upon it a little bit earlier this season, but a lot of interesting things. Any final thoughts from you guys on the Bucks? Anything you want to parting shot on the team at all?
Yeah. I had probably one note from the Brooklyn and the second Chicago game. First off, this is not me doing a victory lap. I was generally like, Noah Clowney, 6 of 9 from 3. Like I wrote, like this guy he's shooting like 4 more threes per game this year, and on the first possession, they're not prepared. He shoots a 3, it goes in. Like this is like the focus that's like is somewhat worrying. Like, and there was a play where they had a pick and roll. I think Riley, you were on the playback with me, but they had a pick and roll, and 2 guys go with whoever the big was, and they leave Clowney wide open. It's like, guys, come on, like.
And Clowney had hit like 4 threes at that point. It was not like maybe.
Hot. Yeah. And my other note from the Chicago game was, we were talking about this off air, but the sub patterns, like it felt like there was a lot of minutes where neither Dame nor Middleton was on the court, and it's like I would have preferred to just have Middleton come off the bench and play all of those minutes if he wasn't going to start. Dame, I was surprised to see Dame played like 37 minutes in that game. He played a lot. Dame looked out of sorts in the first half also, but just that sort of opening of the fourth quarter where they were just like searching for any offense, and like both of those guys are on the bench is like, come on, Doc. Like, I think we could have done something about this.
That the like fourth quarter was like Bobby, Gary Trent Jr. and the fellas. That was the lineup. Yeah. It's like, okay. I mean, I know we got to do what we got to do, but I think Doc alluded after the fact that it was like a minutes restriction thing for Chris, but as Kyle's initial point showed, it's like, well, the bench is super erratic, and even then, like, okay, well, maybe you need to try Pat. I don't know. Maybe you need to try DeLon. Like they ran it's a 9-man rotation against the Bulls, but just kind of showing how light the bench can be, how light the depth is, even without Giannis. You got everybody else but Giannis, and the depth is leaving a little something to be desired. But there's always next week. There's always the new year. We'll get to those predictions in just a little bit. But now we're going to be switching over to the miscellaneous section. Where is my banner? Rapid fire questions to start it. Guys, let me ask you this. Which team in the NBA do you think has the best clutch net rating this season? So I already explained they collect the stats if the game is within 5, with under 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter or in overtime. Who do you think has the best net rating on the season?
It would have been Phoenix early. I remember that because they won a whole bunch of games early. Don't think that would be the answer now. Man, I'm not sure.
I'm going to guess the Knicks. I have no reason for it. I'm just going to guess the Knicks.
What about Boston?
So you guys are in the right direction, that guessing about the best teams in the league are a good direction. That's actually the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is more Cavs slander. Their net rating in the clutch this season is plus 51.0. They have a plus 51 team net rating in the clutch. They are demolishing teams, and they're another team that I would be frightened to face in the playoffs because Dame versus their guards, that's barbecue chicken. In the words of the great Shaquille O'Neal, that's barbecue chicken, and it makes me real nervous. So shout out to the Cavs, hated on yet again, even by us here at Dear Diaries, the staff of Brewhoop, overlooking your success, plus 51.0 net in the clutch. That's amazing. Okay, next question. What's the best movie you saw this year? Kyle,
I don't know.
Am I preempting? Yeah,
I'm not a
go ahead.
massive movie guy, but I will give credit to. I don't know if you guys have watched this Carry On, the new Netflix one with.
I haven't. I'm too terrified because I hate flying. So anything, even if it's just at the airport, I'm not watching it. It looks interesting, but I'm not watching
It is like Netflix movies are what they are, but it is one of the better ones I've watched, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's got what's the actor's name?
Jason Bateman.
Jason Bateman, yeah. So I'll give a special shout out to that. I can't really remember what else I've watched because I generally am not a huge movie guy. I like series, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think like what movie did I watch in 2024 that actually came out in 2024? I'd probably say either Inside Out 2. I think that's what I'm going to go with. Inside Out 2. Oh, Dune Part 2. Never mind.
Dune Part 2 is really good. The black and white planet, excellent. It should get awards just for that alone.
I don't know why I thought that came out last year. I was like, oh no, Dune Part 2 was that, and then Inside Out 2 was a close second.
It does feel forever ago, so because I think it was like February, March, something like that.
Early, yeah, February, March.
Is Carry On the movie where it's like a terrorist setup at the airport, or am I thinking of a different movie? Okay.
Yep.
That is so funny. Okay, my wife and I
as the villain this time.
Whoa. Okay, Jason. He still does he just play himself, except now he's like evil rather than good? Is essentially how it goes?
I don't know. In the trailer, he looked pretty cold blooded. Like it was not like a normal Jason Bateman.
Okay.
Yeah. It felt like Ozark.
I'm thinking of Jason Statham. That's why I'm like, I was like, Jason Statham plays one character. Sorry. Okay. Jason Bateman. That makes much more sense that he was okay. So we saw that trailer, my wife and I, and she was like, oh, we got to watch that. I said, I don't know if I'm into that, but sure, you can go ahead. And she also she's now over it, but she had troubles with flying for a long time. So every time I catch her watching like plane crash videos or whatever on YouTube, I'm like, why are you doing this? You need to turn this off right now. So, okay, I will let her know that it gets the seal of approval from you, Jack, that Carry On from a non-moviegoer was pretty good. Okay, next question. How many games has Milwaukee's Big Three appeared in so far this season?
0.
5.
What am I forgetting? Because Chris didn't play in the first.
I know he played in the NBA Cup semifinal.
Oh yes, they all did play in that one. They played in the Orlando game. They played.
Kyle's doing it next level, trying to remember the games themselves. That's deep lore cut right now.
I'm saying 5.
I'll go 3.
It's right in between. They've played in 4 games together so far this season.
Okay.
I would be happy end of the season if we get that number to 35. Okay, so final question for you this week. Does Giannis promoting sports gambling make you more likely to partake? As a follow-up, will Giannis ever have a normal commercial?
No and no.
Okay.
I have not seen what you're talking about, so maybe I'm out of the loop. But no, I've never partaken in sports gambling, so I'm unlikely to start.
If you go to his Instagram, it's maybe one of the worst CGI'd ads I've ever seen. It has the feeling of a hostage video on like, I don't even know what the deep websites are, but where you go to watch if you want to see just really messed up stuff. Like it had the vibe of that. And he said maybe 3 words in it. And he probably got paid $1 bazillion for that. So I don't hate on the hustle. However, come on, you already have unlimited money and you got to show for sports gambling on top of that. It's kind of harmful to people. But
I always laugh at like, Giannis doesn't need to do promotions. Like, have you seen his contract and his next contract and his, like, I'm just like, all right, just
No,
What
I
point
mean,
is there? You know, just like I
no,
don't know.
normally he's doing ads for companies he's invested in, but because it's Giannis, the companies are like as strange as it gets. It's like a
Right.
candy delivery service. It's like, okay, great, sure, let's go for that. Or like there was like a telehealth medical company in Illinois or something like that. The only normal commercial he's had so far that I've ever seen was him on an Aegean Airlines commercial. And that's because they actually have like stakes and he was just it was like a safety video that he was part of as like a star. It's like, oh, that's cool. That's the only normal thing I've ever seen him in commercially. I guess like there's the JBL stuff, but
I was gonna
yeah,
say, I feel like the Google Pixel things that he did
that's
were
true. Those are
normal.
relatively normal. Yeah. But he doesn't really but it had ads with like Drewski and God, I can't remember the name of the other guy, but it's like Giannis's vibe does not always naturally translate to like, oh hey man, let's hang out or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
it's just Giannis doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. He's very personable, but not like in the way that the TV ads want. So Giannis, keep getting that money. Please try to find it in more morally acceptable ways. But you're my king, so I'll just let it ride. It's no big deal. Okay, that's all I had for Rapid Fire this week. This next section here, people have been waiting. Kyle teased it like a month ago, 2 months ago. I don't know how long ago you teased this. He's
A couple
back.
times.
It's the film review, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Kyle, take it away.
All right. So anyone that's listening knows my oldest son Sterling is obsessed with Sonic, and I'm not even joking. I think 70% of his Christmas and birthday gifts this year were Sonic the Hedgehog related. So when the movie came out, it came out. We watched it on like the Saturday, and I wasn't sure what to expect because I knew that Shadow the Hedgehog was going to be it because they teased it at the end of Sonic 2. So I was like, all right, cool. Because we're also going to get Shadow's backstory. And that was like, how the hell are they going to approach Maria, who is... Oh, okay, I'll get to it. How they were going to incorporate Shadow and his backstory was one of the things I was the most curious about because you kind of have to get a little dark and twisted in order to do that and fully explain who Shadow is. But to start off with, I think it was like it started off like fun. It started off very fun. It started off very simple because it kind of had two aspects of it. So you had the background of Shadow and how he came to be and like what his backstory was, along with Gerald Robotnik, who is the grandfather of Dr. Robotnik. Jim Carrey plays both, does a great job. So you get like that backstory. Then you kind of get to the present day and you have Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. And they're having, they're enjoying life like always, but then obviously that's not going to last long. You know this, but they have to come, they get called in to help out with the situation. And how we get introduced to Shadow is one of the most badass ways because it's just like, all right, you got this whole army of people that, and he just teleports and beats the living crap out of them. And then he gets to Tokyo and he just immediately takes out Tails, takes out Knuckles, just beats up on Sonic. And it was kind of like, oh, and we got Knuckles on the motorcycle. I was like, all right, we are committing. This is great. What I love most about this movie was it did a great job of still telling telling the plot and having that be engaging, but also doing enough. They did a great job with the fan service. So for people that have played these video games growing up or watched the shows, they did a really good job at giving you the fan service and the Easter eggs that is necessary between Sonic basically say on the flight over, like, what, no movie, no snacks, like, I'm out of here. He says that in the games and TV show where, again, with the motorcycle Shadow, that happened. They played Live and Learn, which is huge because that was like the song of the video game. So the fact that they were able to have that, they had the poses. I think it did a great job at doing the fan service that was needed. But then also with Shadow, long story short, Shadow was in prison. The American military, as always, finds a way to, how do we take this and make it benefit us? It doesn't go well, but Shadow befriends Gerald Robotnik's granddaughter named Maria. And in this moment, so the normal lore is the Guardian Units of Nations, GUN, basically the military complex. In the real story, they kind of do a raid and shoot Maria dead. Like, that is what happens. So I was like, how the hell are they going to put this in a movie? Because I don't think you could put this in a movie at the rating that they have now. Like, you're not going to be able to. And we just had a school shooting in Wisconsin. Like, I was like, oh, how are we going to approach it? So instead, they have it. And these are all spoilers, but I mean, at this point, you've either seen it or you're not going to see it. So how they kill her off is they have an explosion. Someone shoots and it causes an explosion that knocks her out. So I was like, okay, they found a way to still give you the background of why Shadow wants revenge, but not in the way that I was expecting it. But I think it did a good job at making Shadow a compassionate villain. Like, yes, he is the antagonist, but you can understand why he is the way he is. And then I would say the older Robotnik is the true antagonist. Like, he is just like, oh no, we're just going to destroy the world because they killed my granddaughter. And Shadow's like, I just want revenge because they did this. So you kind of get that aspect of it. But I think it did a really good job. Jim Carrey, honestly, he should get an Oscar for this. And I'm not even joking. Like, he was so good. And to do it while doing two characters was chef kiss. Keanu Reeves, excellent choice of Shadow. I think everyone brought their A game. And I think that was kind of the part of it where it's like, yes, it was still a very good movie. Like, the thing that I've always been amazed with this trilogy in the Sonic the Hedgehog is they do a good job at they still give you a good and entertaining and fun movie while still giving those that have grown up with it enough of something to care about. So I think those are like the two main things. And this was like the best of the bunch. I would say it's an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I would go back. Like, if Sterling says, let's go watch it, I'll be like, all right, let's find a time. Like, I enjoyed it that much. And this is someone that I knew about Sonic the Hedgehog and I played some of the games, but I was not deep into it. For those that really love Sonic the Hedgehog, I would 100% recommend seeing it.
That's awesome. It's amazing how far this series came, because I remember when the first couple of screenshots of like what Sonic was going to look like and people were not happy. And yet they're on a generational streak right now with these movies. Sterling also approved. Did he enjoy it? Yes. Okay, good.
And the fun part is there's for sure going to be a fourth.
I was going to say.
They tease two characters that are for sure going to be in the fourth movie. And I think what it also did is it gave us that if Jim Carrey decides I'm actually done, they gave his character, like, it wrapped that story up well. But if Jim Carrey decided actually I want to come back, they'll find a way to put him back in. But I think it did a good job at setting up the potential next villain for Sonic 4.
It's like the antithesis in every way of the Mario movie, where that was just like a shit show, a half-ass, and for whatever reason, Chris Pratt was the voice of Mario. Whereas, Jim Carrey, it's like, again, I remember slight doubt, but also when you think about Jim Carrey and who he is as an actor,
he's
and like
perfect.
It's the ideal fit for him to be that character.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, everyone, all the casting made sense. Like, you had Colleen O'Shaughnessy, who's always voice Tails, so it's like, okay, that was like a simple home run. Idris Elba doing Knuckles. Hesitant at first when it came out in the second movie, but it seems like a natural. Like I said, Keanu Reeves was an excellent choice for Shadow. Even the live action cast was really, really good. You have Jim Carrey, you have James Marsden, you have these people that are like, Jim Carrey is a star, but you have like everyone else that is like they're B or C list, and they all contribute really, really well. And Kristen Ritter, I would say she's like B plus A minus, but no, I had a good time watching this movie. Like I said, I highly recommend watching it. You don't need to watch the other Sonic movies or the Knuckles TV show to understand what's going on in Sonic 3, which I also appreciate. Would it help to watch those things? Absolutely, but you don't need to.
I can't believe I lived long enough to see Sonic throw down the gauntlet at the MCU and say, oh, we'll do you one better. Like, we're going to have the TV shows. We're going to have the movies. We're going to have the games. They already have the games on lock. It's amazing.
They had the games unlocked. They had a couple of cartoons, and now they're taking the movies, and now they're going to have their own, like, I wouldn't be surprised if there was, like, this old Sonic verse, because you realistically could do, like, they have the Knuckles TV show. They could do a season 2. You could do something with Shadow. You're going to have a fourth movie, and you can just continue adding more of the characters.
helps that they're all very iconic. Even I, somebody who did not play Sonic at all, I know like the main characters. I know who's all involved, and I know like generally kind of what they're about. So shout out to Sonic, shout out to Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and we'll look forward to Sonic the Hedgehog 4. In the
2027,
review.
so it might be a while.
2027.
You're
We're
gonna have to
looking
wait,
forward to
people.
that. It'll be good. Thanks, Kyle. Good review. Good. I'm glad it paid off too for both you and Sterling. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say Sterling's been waiting for this movie for almost 2 years, so like I'm glad it was good.
You will be watching it a million times between now and number 4.
Oh, once it's on Paramount Plus, I'm not watching.
It's game over.
Nothing else is gonna be on. Yeah,
It's
he's already
over.
asked. Oh, is it on Paramount Plus? Like, no, it just came out. Like, it literally is in the theaters. It just came out 3 days ago.
Brutal time for a kid to have to realize how theater runs work. And it's like, no. I mean, sometimes it'll come right to the streaming.
I mean, he's lucky that at least it'll go to a streaming. Like, this is not like not only do you have to wait for it to leave theaters, but then it's got to be on like a DVD.
Yep. Kids are blessed these days and they don't even know it. Okay.
They really are.
From Sonic the Hedgehog to Adelaide, Australia, and maybe beyond, our next segment here in Miscellaneous Tales from Basketball's Outback. Jack, what's the update? I know people... You kind of were softening the ground for them last week to not have super high expectations around where the season may go from here. Where has it happened? Where are we at now a week later?
Yeah, much worse than we were when we last spoke, Riley. So they played 2 games since that point. They played the Brisbane Bullets on Christmas Eve, and they got... I mean, honestly, I don't even think they played that badly. Brisbane they have this import who... Really, like his name's Casey Prather, and he struggled. He's a former star in the league, and he'd been injured. Like he didn't play basketball for like 2 years or something, and he came back really bad for the first 5 games, and now he's just not missing. Like he just didn't miss anything. They have a really good big man who protects the rim and dunks everything in sight. So they basically just embarrassed us. They played us off the court. And then on the real disappointing game was Perth. They played Perth on Saturday night at home, and Perth are a horrible defensive team as well. Like we're the worst, and they're like the second worst, I think. And I mean, it was just laughable. The defense was like, it looked like they had given up. Like it looked like something internal was going on that we didn't know as the viewers, as the fans. And then there was some stuff that came to light after the game. Basically, one of the big men, Isaac Humphries, did an interview where he basically said nobody knows their role. What does he say? He said he gets asked if the coach's message is getting through, and he just bluntly replies, no. So
okay, good. That's good.
All right.
Yeah. So they just gave up a bazillion threes. They got lit up, and they lost by like it would have been like 30 or something. So yeah, it's the vibes are about as bad as they've ever been, and it's looking like we're heading for another head coach next year. So yeah,
okay.
I wish I could have.
I was gonna say, is there any positive?
So no, like the game, ever since those suspensions, that melee, it has just been downhill. I don't know if we won 1 game against the team below us. So, yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm looking at it now. You 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've lost 7 of your last 8. It looks like.
Yeah,
that's not
the
good.
one thing that I've always complained about with this. Like there is a lot of internal, they've had a lot of different head coaches, and there's like a lot of player turnover, but the best teams in the NBL over a sustained period of time they have a culture where basically, you're either with it or you're out sort of thing. And there is no real accountability and discipline with this franchise and with the players that it recruits. Like the Tasmania Jack Jumpers came into the league probably, I think it might have been 4 seasons ago, and immediately just establish a culture of you play defense or you don't play. And it's just like, there's an element of like Montrez coming to the league, and like he's probably the biggest import the league's ever had. And there's an element of like treating him a little bit with kid gloves. And, like, for example, that in 2 games now in a row, he hasn't joined like the team's huddle after the game. And so he says it's because he was mad and he didn't want to upset his teammates. I don't know if that's true, but people are starting to take notice, and it doesn't look good from the outside. Sort of what he's been like, his behavior over the past, like since he's come back, has been, his effort on the court on both ends has been bad. And he just, I don't know. Like it's looking like he's not really enjoying himself right now, which isn't great. So,
wow,
yeah,
that's a bummer. And I mean, the whole idea of like establishing a really strong culture, that applies to sports at any sort of level, but in leagues wherein the talent variance is a lot higher than, say, like the NBA, which there is still a lot of variance in talent, but you're working even further on the margins. So being able to find the right mix and match is always tough. And I think part of the trouble for it, not all Australian teams necessarily, but the fact that they are importing like a lot of the top talent are guys from abroad. And so that's a lot more, okay, you're kind of picking and choosing and hoping the fit works out. Whereas, here, or even if it's mostly Australian players, like they're a little more used to whatever the culture happens to be from the roots upward. Whereas you bring in an American player, it's like, okay, well, it's just a different like setup, different background to how, American kids play basketball, how they grow up into it, or anywhere else really. I mean, it's kind of the same. Serbia is different. Like they have their own way of setting things up. So it's just trying to graft on that foreign talent, I think is a little bit more difficult. And foreign talent fits in the NBA because you're playing at such a high level that it kind of overcomes that. I mean, it's still can have an issue, but it's very interesting, that sort of balance there.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll mention is, I was talking to someone we were just getting absolutely destroyed in this game, and we were just talking on Twitter with some mutuals about like what is the problem with the team, and some people was like, oh, the coach is the problem, and it's like, you look at their personnel, they have a bit of the problem that the Bucks have. It's a bit similar to Damian Lillard. Is like Kendrick Davis is the point guard. He's like 5'11" or whatever he is, 6 foot. He's tiny. Dejan Vasiljevic is not interested in playing defense. He's the starting 2 guard. Their starting 3, their defensive stopper has been injured. He did his hamstring, so that's a massive problem. And then they start 2 bigs. They start Montrez and Isaac Humphries, and both of those are centers, but they start them both. And so, those guys are going to get caught out on guards and stuff because one of them has to guard the center, the other guards someone else. And so, I made the case that and they're starting like a development player who's now getting real minutes. And he's, 6'1" or whatever. So they just don't have the personnel, and the guys that you have to have on the court for the majority of the minutes are naturally just horrible defenders a lot of the time. So it's hard to build a team like that. But that's sort of what they're rolling with at the moment.
2 bigs plus 2 guards, one of which is not interested in defense, the other of which is undersized. It's a bad situation. It's
a problem, and they can't really fix it. Like that's what they're rolling with. So,
well, it could always be worse. You could be the Taipans. You could who are 3-15 on the season, and apparently somehow even more abject than you guys. So
they have
lost. Worse.
Taipans have lost I don't know what the number's at now. I think it's like 13 games in a row.
Oh,
Jesus Christ. Yeah. All right. Well, shout out to the 36ers. Lost season, potentially. I mean, looking at the standings, if we take a miraculous turnaround, great. It ain't looking great.
Yeah.
But, it never say die, I guess. But even if this is the end for the 36ers in the 2024 season, 2024-2025 season, there's always next year. So we appreciate the updates. We'll continue to force you to give us updates, especially when they pivot to playing the deep bench guys once the season is over and Montrez has had a blow up with the coach in public. So, all right. With that, we reached the last segment of the podcast, weekly predictions, last game of 2024 before we head into the new year. Exciting times. The week begins at the Indiana Pacers on Tuesday. Strange 2 p.m. start. I think I'll be doing double duty there, working. Sorry, employers, don't listen to this podcast. And covering the game. Then the team heads back to home to face the D'Angelo Russell and the Brooklyn Nets at home on Thursday. And then it's the Portland Trail Blazers, who are god-awful, on Saturday at home as well. Kyle, what say you for your prediction this week?
I'll say, I'm feeling good. I'll say 3-0. I feel like they'll have learned their lesson against Brooklyn. We have to remember they lost to Portland last year, so I don't think they're going to want to repeat that. And I think Indiana, something that's not fully clicked with Indiana yet. So I think Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee will take it seriously. So 3-0.
Jack.
Yeah, I would have said 3-0. So part of this is I'm hoping Giannis comes back at some point. I mean, so that's 2 more days off after last game. Although it sounded like he didn't even do shoot around or something.
No, they sent him home. He was so sick
home.
that they sent him home.
Yeah. So, I mean, man, I just wish I really want to see him again. I'm getting Giannis withdrawals. So, but that's that. Indiana beat Boston tonight. So
yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, I think Andrew Nemhard, from what I see on Twitter, has been a savior for them. He wasn't playing in the first game, so I don't know. My thing with if we play Indiana and Giannis plays, like they just can't guard him with literally anyone. So I will go 2-1. I'm going to say they drop the Indy game.
I agree. I'm going to go 2-1 as well, just because I think Giannis, they'll try to buy him a little bit more time. He's always, it's like the matinee game too is always kind of a weird start time. So I think they'll give him a few more days off. Team has been good at adjusting. If they play a team 1 week or 2 weeks before and then play him again, they do a decent job coming around and covering them. So I think they'll beat Brooklyn, although the Russell edition is kind of a X factor. He could either be horrible or terrific. We'll see and find out. And then Portland,
if
Simons,
he doesn't get bought out, Riley.
Oh, is he on that would actually make more sense.
That could be an interesting one. Does he get bought out?
That would be interesting. However, knowing our luck, he would suit up for the Nets for a single game, and it would be on the road against the Bucks to lead them to a wild upset.
It's the ultimate D'Lo. Just I don't give a damn game. Like D'Lo's playing on a tanking team. He would be the first. He would drop 30 in that game.
He's aiming for like the Basketball Reference where guys have like 3 or 4 teams in the same year. So it's like impossible to really tell what his stats are because it's like, okay, he bounced around so much. That's what he's trying to. He's like, let me get one.
Yeah, that's the best version of D'Lo. Just I don't give a damn D'Lo.
Yeah, and fitting that he's back in Brooklyn. Portland, Simons is a little too inconsistent. Scoot sucks. I don't know where the rest of their team is at, but I feel pretty good that with or without Giannis, we'll win that one. So 2-1 as well. Temper the expectations a little bit. I thought they were going to do well this past week. Not so much, but that's all right. That'll bring us to the end of episode 193 of Dear Diaries. We appreciate you listening. As always, game coverage over at brewhoop.com. Pre-game, during game, post-game, extended. We have the playback.tv if you want to watch the games with us. We have VIP passes. We'll pass them out. You can watch the game. We'll give you the stream. Just go in there and ask nicely, please. Please don't be mean to us in the comments. Monday Morning Media Roundup makes its triumphant return after a couple weeks off due to illness. Wednesday Weekly Wrap-Up, Questions and Antlers. Tuesday Tracker, the Tuesday Tracker results. You want the Bucks content, folks. We have the Bucks content. It's at brewhoop.com. You can also find us on YouTube. All the usual stuff. We appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you again in 2025. See you soon.